What's going on, everybody? We're here in City Hall to meet with the 43rd Mayor of Burlington, Emma Mulvaney-Stanak. Emma is the first woman and openly queer mayor of Burlington, so we decided to stop by to see if she has a little time to kick with us today. Let's see. Hello.
Hey, come on in.
How's it going?
It's going. Kachi, how are you?
Doing well. How you doing?
Good. Welcome. Welcome to City Hall.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another amazing episode of Kickin with Kachi, where we highlight individuals that are really taking their industry by storm. And today, we have an amazing guest. We have the 43rd Mayor of Burlington, Vermont, Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanak. Thank you for coming and kicking with me today. Those of you who don't know, Emma is the first woman mayor and first openly queer mayor of Burlington. And first progressive mayor of Burlington since my research since the 50s, I believe, a little earlier than that as well. So as you near like your 2-year mark in office, as you enter the final year of your first term, a lot of changes, a lot of amazing things happening in this city. How do you describe the experience of managing a city that you've held such strong roots in, right? Like your parents were activists here in Vermont. You worked a lot with labor unions, a lot with workers' rights, and done a lot of volunteer work, consulting work here in this state. A lot of love and a lot of history here. Your kids go here, you're married here. How's it been in kind of managing this city?
Yeah. Well, I have to say it's been a very interesting ride because it is a pretty impossible job. And I knew that going into it when I ran for office for this role in 2023. The election was in March of 2024. And what has really transpired in the last 2 years was nothing I could have even predicted. The Trump administration 2.0 came in like a force in all the wrong and most harmful kind of ways. And in the last year in particular, it has really created huge pressures on municipalities across the country. And again, all the negative and worst kind of ways. And it's not just immigration enforcement, which is right here in Burlington and causing a lot of harm and disruption in families and fear. But it's also even day one or month one of the Trump administration, there was freezing of federal funds that created great uncertainty for local municipalities where federal government dollars were some of the most reliable you can get. So I knew walking in 2 years ago that we had some financial challenges with a budget gap in my first budget. I knew we had an incredibly challenging time trying to figure out our community safety system that it could actually function. And I also knew that we had a housing crisis. And I thought, and I know I was well prepared for that, but these added layers have been really difficult, I'm not gonna lie. And I also knew when I was running that I was really concerned about the direction the city could potentially go in that election. There was sort of a binary choice that was being built in that mayor's race around turning more towards the center, and I would say reactionary responses to our growing community safety concerns, or we could turn towards more, frankly, a community of love and care and looking at the basic realities of when people's basic needs are not met and when systems are crumbling. How do we show up for each other? And I was really proud of the fact that I put a coalition winning campaign together. I surprised a few people, which I'm not mad about. And what has really transpired in these last 2 years has been a different way of approaching things. And I'm sure you'll get into it, but I think one of the most interesting things that's also been a deeper challenge than I anticipated is we have a divided government locally, meaning the mayor structure here, here's a little civic geek moment, we have a strong mayor structure. All mayors are strong. I don't want to call anyone else weak, but it is kind of like the sort of the lexicon for an executive structure in government, sort of like the governor. So I have executive privileges and powers, and I'm a separate branch than the legislative body, which is the city council here. And that city council is a divided, it's divided government because the majority on that is a different party than my party. So I'm a Progressive Party member, and we have 7 out of the 12 members of council as Democrats, and it's created tension. And I have to say it's been, I'm always come forward with leading with coalition and co-governing is healthier for democracy, and I always will believe that. Truly, but there's been tensions around different opinions, and I think part of what has unfortunately happened is the division and the negativity of national politics has found its way into Burlington, and I really hope that we can turn the page on that going forward.
And I think that in this political climate right now, as much as the kids I coach refuse to say it, and for you as well, we're so young in the political game, right? And the idea of change, right? Today feels so out of reality, right? Because it feels as if politics, power is an old white man's game. As we've seen through the history of Burlington, all of our mayors have been old white men, or if they weren't old when they came in, they probably were older when they left. And in your political history, right, you've constantly changed the status quo, right? In 2009, you were the youngest member of the Burlington City Council, making history as his youngest member. And your appointment as mayor, you're the fourth youngest mayor, I believe, to be appointed in my research,
Good
right?
to know.
Yeah, I was looking at my research. You're,
that's at like 43. What was I, 42, 43?
I think about 43, yeah. And then
Wow.
Bernie Sanders was like 39, Warren Murray was like 39 as well. So you're on the younger end, right? And we're seeing a wave across the country of younger politicians with like Mamdani, mayor of New York City, Crockett, who didn't win her candidacy in Texas, but was an House rep in Texas as well. Do you believe that this shift, right, this idea of not appealing to a centrist idea, going for more progressive attitudes, coalition work, right? Knowing that the hard work is hard, but it is required. Do you think that your mayorship can serve as an effort to dismantle that age hierarchy in politics?
Yeah. Well, I think representation truly matters. And one of the things that even from the left I sometimes get is like, don't talk about identity politics. And it has been so weaponized on the federal level to like not talk about any sort of identity you have. And that plays right into the patriarchy. It feeds like institutional racism. And it really continues to embolden the barriers that would allow people who come from marginalized backgrounds to actually see themselves not only in these positions, but being able to run and serve. And that's a really unhealthy democracy again. It doesn't represent the true diversity of a community. So when people break these glass ceilings that still remain, to be able to be the first, it really starts to show a different reality. Super quick story, when I was growing up in central Vermont, I was in 6th grade, 7th grade middle school or something like that, and Madeline Kunin was the governor at the time, and she came to our middle school. And it's those formative years, right, when you start to see, you start to realize like there is a governor, what is that role, you know, or these leadership roles. And it made such a positive impression on me because I had no idea that there had never been a woman before her in this role ever before. And so I had this like burned in my brain idea that like, oh, of course there have been women governors. Little did I know that she would still would be the only woman governor of the state still to today. And so it starts to put things like in like a possibility category for young people. And I'm so proud to welcome, especially, you know, kids like under 12, 15 to City Hall to do tours, because I know that they're seeing this body and this gender identity and this, you know, sexual identity represented, and it's normal and it's powerful in all the good ways, and it's accessible. And to me, I want to be able to have young people see that. And then more importantly, like we also have a lot more barriers to break down, right? There's never been a person of color in this role. On Monday, we finally elected the first Latina to our city council for the first time in history. So there's plenty of barriers still to break down in this progressive little bubble. I think it's like a perception, it's not real. Like we have all the same issues. But I think it also brings, it brings a different perspective when these perspectives are at the table. And it is fascinating. You should actually trail me someday, because at a day of the life of the mayor, it is fascinating how sexism still shows up every day. I navigate it. And I'm not just talking about the trolls who live online and in the social media land and Reddit. God help me with Reddit. Anyway, but I'm talking about like, you know, conversations I'll have with, I won't name the sector, but pretty much every sector, and how, you know, I will be interrupted. I will be mansplained. I will be all sorts of stuff, still even as the mayor. And so what I often do in those spaces, because I think it's so important beyond just winning as a first, is to dismantle that in real time, because I bring positional power as the mayor, and I pause and I regroup and I make sure that the group knows that that's not how that will not stand with me, but also that's not how we're going to model that, because there are other women, there are other folks in that room who hold marginalized identities, and that kind of behavior needs to be a thing of the past. Because the last thing I'll say is, it's one thing to get elected, do all that work to get elected, to get yourself into any leadership role that has, you know, not traditionally been held by someone like you or me, frankly, right? And I think part of it is making sure that we make those institutions more accessible for people to retain those seats, to be able to see themselves and stay in those roles for the long term. Because once people get in there, you can sometimes hit the wall of the institutionalized nature of racism and sexism, homophobia. It's very real and still alive. So part of my charge here is to like make it better. Right,
and I love the, like I said, I used to work with Emma in a previous role when she is a consultant, and the thing you've always said was to say the thing, right? To do the thing. And I love that with, you know, in politics. I feel like when we have us, as I say, us on the ground versus those in politics, it's always felt like a disconnect, right? It always felt as if politicians don't listen when we say, voting doesn't matter, this and the third, right? But when we go back to your campaign, right, you raised about $10,000 to $20,000 less than your opponent, who was a lot more centrist than you, who was appealing to, I guess, a wealthier demographic, where your campaign was coalition-based. Volunteers, people, workers, actual service workers, people that are, everyday middle-class workers, and you won 51.2% of the entire ballot, right? Winning some of the constituents that weren't even in your own base. They were scaffolding to a movement that you juggled while you were dealing with motherhood, right? Younger kids, as well as still being in the state house as a House representative. How did this experience, right, of having volunteers, having people on the ground that wasn't fueled by big dollar bills, but fueled by big energy and big passion, how did that lend to your mindset of, leading a mayoral cabinet?
Well, community-based organizing is just one of my ethos. Most of my career before I was a consultant and before I was even in elected politics was either in the labor movement or in community organizing, because that builds resilience in a community, and it also makes sure that folks are engaged in their own local democracy, which is, again, such a fundamental thing. So I knew when I ran that it was going to take a coalition to win. This city was sort of really fragmented. There were some people who were just totally disengaged. There were some people who made a lot of assumptions based on their politics and, frankly, overutilizing the police to solve our community safety challenge we had at the time, and was running solely on that, which was a very fear-based way of talking about, like, how do we support and fix Burlington. And it was also playing right into all the negative messaging that was coming out of Burlington at the time. Burlington is not exceptional in the sense of the challenges that we've been facing for years now, especially since the pandemic. Many communities, especially cities, especially the biggest cities in each of these states in our country, have homelessness, have mental health, mental health needs, and substance use challenges. And in a rural state, it's like more compounded because we've become very vulnerable to the opioid, and drug market and whatnot. And so part of this is making sure you can articulate a different world as possible and be very clear about, like, how to bring people into that so they can see themselves. And we had a massive field campaign. We had 300 plus volunteers. It was all people powered in the best kind of Bernie Sanders kind of way, who actually was one of the first real progressive mayors, I would say, like modern day progressive mayors.
But I remember you'd have your sessions, and you'd have situations where, like, a bring what you can sort of thing to the donate to the campaign trail, or like you kind of you had your lunch, you have your listening sessions all around the city and all around the state as you were just listening to people, right? And they can bring and come in as they were, right?
And we also didn't over rely on, like, mail or certainly, paid media and stuff like that, because we door knocked everybody and we did lots of phone banking. That's how you engage people authentically and build relationships and bring people in. And I'm a big proponent that I think we need to take money out of politics, period. Because back to what I was saying before about barriers for folks being able to run and serve. I come from a working class background, and I do not have wealthy people in my family or in my friend network whatsoever. So it's really become more and more inaccessible for people to run when you know that to run for mayor, for example, it took almost over $100,000.
Right.
And I was joking with my early on folks were like paid volunteers, and then they turned into part-time paid staff. I kept saying, I don't have wealthy people. I don't even know how we're going to raise like $10,000, let alone more than that. And it was through the momentum we built with, really building that coalition where folks started to give what they could, and it kept, snowballing in the best kind of ways to be able to kind of really be a people-run campaign. But when I say, take money out of politics, we should really have publicly financed campaigns, which it would create a ceiling for what gets spent, and everyone who qualifies to run, gets signatures to run, would be able to have a reasonable amount of money, but not excessive amounts of money that's publicly funded, so we can have, frankly, sane elections that also don't waste tons of money on things that are just transactional, like TV ads and things like that.
Right. Yeah. With all of the and you come from, families of activists and working with people on the ground. And like I said, for us on the ground, as I always say, we have a very big disconnect with people in politics, right? Very much the idea of it's inaccessible, and especially those that work in service industries, I believe that we have a bigger disdain for people that work in politics, because we find those to be people that are constantly making decisions that make our lives harder, right? And navigating that disconnect, how did you or when did you decide that you wanted to run for office, right? You're already in the House, right? You're already in politics, but
Yep.
then running an executive branch, running
Yep.
as an executive officer.
Yep.
When did you decide to say, hey, I know there's not many people, if there's not many that look like me that's assume
Yeah.
this role.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of constituents that may not want someone else like me in this role. And then you still decide, I don't know if I'm going to raise $20,000 because I don't have the money to get me into this role. But then you still decided to go ahead and, lead the charge. You've already had your experience in leading, campaigning and helping other people's campaign, but now developing your own.
Yep.
How did that kind of come into play?
Well, right before I was decided to run for mayor, I had served in the Vermont legislature for about 3 years at that time. And, I was in the legislative branch and I was in the House, which is 150 people from around the state of Vermont, working to create policy. And then it's a two-chamber system in Vermont, so there's a Senate as well. And despite how much work I was putting in, it always felt like I wasn't having the kind of influence and engagement in actual lawmaking that I really wanted. I wanted to make sure that there, especially from a worker's perspective, from an economic and social justice perspective, I just felt like I was nibbling around the edges. And it was a few different reasons. One, because I'm a third-party representative in the State House, so I was a progressive party. I chose a political minority party, even though it's a major party in Vermont, because the values just align more with me. It was a party that actually, when we put bills forward, they truly are moving minimum wage to livable wage, for example, giving the workers the right to strike who don't have it right now, making sure there's protections around people's right to organize, and also, for example, there was a bill that went through around adding the ability to organize to agricultural workers. Fundamentals like that are just really important. And I saw, unfortunately, not only the Democratic Party not really moving those policies forward, they would sort of talk about it in a campaign, and they might introduce a bill, but the bill just would stand on the wall, which is stand the wall, which is a kind of phrase. There's fancy index cards. That's how old school Vermont is. They're index cards placed on the physical wall. We're not really modern tech in the Vermont legislature. But I was just frustrated because it was just not going anywhere despite tons and tons of work. So and again, when I described earlier around what I was seeing right here in Burlington, I knew that the nature of a strong mayor structure would allow me to have a lot more direct influence on not only policymaking, but specifically what's happening in my city. Because it's important to do state level policy, but it's much more removed from people's day-to-day lives. So I made that decision because I just want, the other part about being in the Vermont legislature, it pays so little.
Oh my God, I've seen
about another barrier for
yes,
working
I've
people.
seen the salary. It's less than it's not even a livable wage.
Especially because people think that you just don't do any legislative work after the session's done. Session's January to May, which is completely ridiculous because constituents need help. They reach out. You're developing bills if you're a decent legislator, not during the session, but off session. So all to say, it was really a important moment to be able to kind of shift into more of a direct impact and being able to fully focus on this as my livelihood, because it is a full-time position. It's way more than a full-time position, actually. But you have a little bit of staff, and you have the whole administration of city government working with you at your direction. And the other thing I'll say about a strong mayor, it's kind of like having a city manager role and the kind of the executive powers politically in one position. So I'm literally running the city with 14 department heads, but I am the CEO essentially of the city. Yeah.
And I would say, looking for that power, right? Because, like I said, for young people, we often feel, or people that are politically aware but feel politically disadvantaged, that we don't have that power, right? We're always seeking that power, looking for individuals that just, like I said, just do the thing, right? And we always constantly feel as if right now we're voting for the lesser of two evils. So it is refreshing that when we were put forth an option of progression, right? Option of maybe doing the work that is a little hard, right? The work that requires a little bit of introspection, a little bit of hard conversation, but ends up with a better result. I'm happy that we were able to do so, but obviously there's a lot more work to do, right? And in the last 2 years, major shifts in Burlington, right? And I can kind of list off the criticisms of things that started out, but then how we ended up, right? Criticisms of the downtown project, criticisms of all the construction with housing, criticisms of the BPD, right? But then I see today and where downtown is beautiful, right? So many more people are coming into downtown. I'm seeing a lot more housing down on King Street, over in the pit, right? That was once called a literal pit, is now a high-rise building, right? I'm seeing situations where the BPD is more staff than it has been in the last 3 years, and crime has been going down, and City Hall Park in Church Street has had more businesses and more people coming there. Do you think politics, as you kind of sit in this role now, right, as opposed to being in the House and being in the State House where a lot of people don't know what's going on, but now you're in the mayor's seat and press conferences, social media, anything that kind of happens, you're getting calls and emails. Is it a lot more of you are hearing a lot of the criticisms and just seeing the wins, right? You're not getting the thank yous, but you're see the outcomes like, well, they talked a lot of crap in the winter, but now they're enjoying it in the spring, sort of thing.
Well, I will say that one of the biggest challenges for Burlington is that the perception game, because the media, unfortunately, traditional media, I will say, has not done a very adequate job of really reporting the totality of Burlington, like really what's happening. It's a lot more nuanced than what you see on most traditional media, and that's because most of the media is owned by national conglomerates. It's not locally based anymore, and clicks win. I mean, that's what gets the ads. That's what gets the views. That drives, unfortunately, a lot of traditional media these days. So if it bleeds, it leads, unfortunately, is a phrase that's very true. And so the over-reporting, the repeated reporting on sort of the more difficult stories about Burlington are the things that will still hit Google, right, when people just wonder about Burlington. But there's so much more going on that is positive, that is building momentum. And I talked last night, I did my State of the City address, which is sort of like the State of the Union for Burlington. And I spoke with real numbers and real tangible results about what has really shifted in these last 2 years. We have a lot to be proud of because we are trending in the right direction. In 2025, through a lot of hard work of rebuilding our police department over these first 2 years, now our police officers and our community safety officers and the community safety liaisons, which are kind of like the social work kind of positions, have clarity and role and purpose. And working along dispatch, we send the right kind of help that's appropriate for the call. Before, we had really decimated the trust within our community, because in 2024, when I came in, people were giving up even calling for help because there wasn't even an adequate response coming. And now I'm proud to say incident counts are actually up, which shows that people are calling and engaging with our entire community safety system. It doesn't mean that scary things are up in terms of incidents. It means people are finally re-engaging.
They're trusting the fact that there's a system they can call into to call for help and safety, right?
And you're not always going to get a police officer because that's not the appropriate response. And there's even more trust building to do, of course, with communities, especially communities that have been over-policed for decades. And knowing the history of that is really important in terms of training and making sure that we have a real comprehensive review. The other major complicating factor, of course, is back to just the immigration enforcement. That is really unprecedented. We are navigating some really uncharted waters, and so that's some of the hard work we're ready to take on to make sure our communities are safe and people aren't living in fear. I would just say, though, in terms of again, the complexities of Burlington, as we have these big generational projects, what we're trying to make sure we're doing is not taking on more than what we can both afford and what we can sustain, knowing the impact that Main Street had when it closed down, Main Street for a long period of time. It's now completely reopened. We're going to be celebrating in mid-July, and now we're just working on streetscaping, and you can sense kind of like how intentional that is for really inviting people in downtown. And some of the other big pieces include like the Champlain Parkway, which is older than you and me probably combined, 60-something years of trying to connect this other spur road to the interstate to bring people further into the community. And then for housing, we do have a lot of new housing going up. And what I want to do is democratize how we do it. So we're not just relying on a couple of bigger, well-financed developers who are the fancy building in the pit. There's two of them now, actually. That is really expensive housing for the most part in there. And so what we need to do, and what I put in place that's starting this year, is around how do we bring resources to individuals to do more infill, which is essentially a fancy term for putting in ADUs, accessory dwelling units, tiny houses, mother-in-law apartments, that kind of stuff, for individual people's properties, because that helps build our housing stock out. And also with some strategies to keep it affordable, can help incentivize people to not charge market rate rents, but really provide housing for neighbors.
No, I love that too. And like you said, I think that coming from a major city, I come from New York City, right? And I didn't subscribe to a lot of the perception that Burlington had, maybe because I had a bigger view of like a major city, right? Like downtown is very much reminiscent of like other places in New York City. So I didn't really see it as like, oh my God, Burlington is in a cesspool. Oh my goodness gracious. But I do appreciate, right, in the sense of that I have lived here in the last 4 or 5 years, that I have seen Burlington revitalized in itself, right? I've seen Burlington try and bring itself in intention, right? And I think that on the ground, there's been a lot of spur, but then now seeing a legislative push to bring Burlington to the standard that it already is, right? We have the first electric aviation company in our backyard, right? Like we have the first socially responsible ice cream company right there in Church Street, right? We have the most bars per square space in America.
Oh, do we?
My Google searches are great.
Breweries. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
So the idea of the beauty of Burlington, right, and amplifying it, right, because a lot of people didn't know these things, right? I think when it comes to politics, it is also exposing things that maybe people don't realize, like our water systems in under the street are like 80-something years old and they need to be renovated, and that would require a 6-month renovation because no one has done it in the last 100 or so years, right?
Well, and we couldn't actually support businesses or more housing without actually upgrading the infrastructure that's underground. And so part of it is also, sometimes people just don't understand those details, and the dramatically negative impact it would mean if all the water breaks started to happen up and down, because they're actually older than the Brooklyn Bridge. Just
oh my goodness gracious.
A city reference in here, which is over 100 years plus old, right? And they were built with bricks, believe it or not. So it's not a system that could support the kind of growth we need, or for even making sure existing businesses can actually operate.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully that there will be some man in 30 years and be like, I'm so glad that we appointed a woman to be in our office.
I really think that part of, again, any mayor who's serving anywhere right now is like our true champions and true lovers of their community, because it is so difficult right now to see and to articulate a vision beyond the really hard times we're living in right now.
Right. And I appreciate, before we get into our final questions, I appreciate you navigating, because federal pressures and immigration enforcement, that only comes to bring deeper distrust, right? As much as I know you've been kind of rebuild trust in community and public safety, you know, immigration coming in and then just reinstituting a lot of institutional terror and harm. It's hard to navigate, so I can really appreciate you as a leader for navigating that, because we are living in crazy times, especially with a federal government that seems to not heed the calls of constituents and local municipalities. So what sort of things now positively can we look forward to, right? I know you said we're going to be celebrating a year since opening of Main Street, and what else? What we have a date? Is something we can look forward to?
Yeah, July 17th and 18th are going to be the celebration days, so people should plan, save the date now, to come downtown and help celebrate the opening of Main Street. We're also the new Burlington High School.
Yes, new Burlington High School is coming up.
I just went by it this morning, and it's looking fabulous. It's about to open this fall, but there'll be a community celebration later this summer as well, so everyone can partake in that building, even if you don't have a young person in your life. And that one in particular truly shows like great care for this community, because we finance that on our own as Burlington. The state 1,000 years ago used to have a construction aid pool of money as a state, because that's a big cost for any community, even Burlington being the biggest. But we knew that so much was at risk with that unhealthy, unworkable building that we needed to frankly raise it and rebuild it from the ashes. And so it's so exciting to have that, because that's a true investment in the future, literally, of the city. So that's another big moment. In my speech last night, I announced a couple of exciting, innovative things around our housing developments. So I talked about, how we're going to democratize housing and infill. And one of the things we're going to do is create a housing. This is not a cool name, so we're still workshopping it. But like it's a housing shepherd. This makes it feel like we're going back to like 1772. But anyway, housing shepherd, which is essentially going to be a facilitator. So we have a lot of like bottlenecking, and if you're an individual, it's hard to navigate. How do I put a tiny house in my backyard, right? So this position will actually help people get to yes, to like get from the inception of the idea to actually completion of the project. And that is going to be, I think, a game changer for individuals being able to really navigate this without having to hire architects and other people and whatnot. The other housing sort of immediate accelerated idea is to look at and map out all of our parcels in the city that have the most maximum ability to get some housing on as soon as possible, like built there. And so with that will help guide us strategically to be the leaders as the city in housing development instead of being a second player where we're sort of just supporting the private sector.
Right.
Because I am really a big believer with my progressive background here about like people have to be at the center of our policy making, not the market, not the capital for some private entity.
And that's awesome, and I can't wait to see others, because one of my biggest things I think about for Vermont in general is young people, right? Like as young people living here, how we'll be able to stay here and live here and be affordable here. So, and Burlington's one of the best cities to live in Vermont. So I'm glad that there's initiatives taken to really tackle that issue. All right, before we get out of here, we have 5 minutes. I know that as much as we've been enjoying this conversation, Emma is a mayor, so she does have a real job to get back to. But I do have a quick lightning round to get into, to get some more insight on our mayor and some things that she likes around this city. So it's lunchtime. Where would we find the mayor eating lunch?
I am a major Stone Soup goer. You know, they keep me alive. They have the best yummy food, and they've been on where is it, College Street for like 20 plus years. A real great place, fresh food all the time. Yeah.
Best Vermont beer. I know this is going to be probably a lot. This is all for jokes, all right? Don't repeal any of your whatevers, you know. But let's say top 3 then, so that we don't get them all riled up.
Well, I'm gonna I'm gonna lose votes here. I don't like beer. Is that like the most horrible answer ever? I'm like a wine drinker.
Okay, is there a favorite Vermont wine?
Oh God, now I'm really gonna lose one. Well, I mean, but I have to say there's some really great Quebec wines that are coming out, and I'm actually got to check in the Vermont wine scene a little bit more because I think we've been crafting it better lately. But what I will say is I'll need to give you a favorite bar. Devil Takes a Holiday.
I love this. Yes.
It's just right off of City Hall Park. They're great and creative with the cocktails and the vibes. Yeah.
I love the what was it? Is it the Nerdo Spicy? The Nerdo Spicy that has the light in it. Yes, that's my favorite one. Yes. Your favorite Burlington fun fact? I don't know if you have one.
Burlington fun fact. I don't know if this might be the most fun, but like the State House, this City Hall has burned down and had to be rebuilt. So I always try to pretend like I know all the history of this building because I give de facto tours to the young people I mentioned earlier. But it is fascinating how many fires existed in this city before we had a modern day fire suppression system known as a fire department. And so anyway, it's an interesting fact that our major government buildings often have burned completely down and had to be rebuilt.
So tells you a lot about how people thought of the government back in those days.
Well, not City Hall necessarily, but there was a lot of arson at various parts in Burlington's history. Some pretty big churches in particular were burned, unfortunately, especially in the 70s. So when people have like perspective about Burlington, the 70s are actually a much harder time for the city. There was a lot of urban renewal stuff that came out of those years. Interview for another time.
So understand that your woman mayor is not the most of your concerns to those of you that are still reeling about a 2023 election.
Right, the haters.
Right. So this is like the 2 biggest sports right now, I believe, in Vermont: hockey or soccer. Where are you kind of falling your? I know with Vermont Green taking some wins lately, but we also have a great great hockey team here as well. So what sport are you leaning to now?
I'm definitely more of a soccer fan. Although I have to say, if you haven't seen Heated Rivalry, that show, I was like, okay.
I've been hearing a lot about Heated Rivalry.
Maybe I got to start watching hockey more, But yeah.
All right. Last, if you guys don't know, Vermont's a great band place, especially Burlington. Like Fish, Deadheads are galore here, right? Live band town. Do you have a favorite band?
Well, I'm going to keep it with the women. Grace Potter.
Yes.
She does so much for Vermont, and she does a Grand Point North Festival every summer, end of summer, September, down on the waterfront. And she's so loyal to Burlington and bringing all that vibrancy. So I'll say Grace Potter. Awesome. Mayor Mulvaney-Stanak, thank you for coming and kicking with me and taking some time out of your day. I appreciate it. You guys can check out this interview at our Instagram at Kickin with Kachi Show and our YouTube at Kickin with Kachi as well. You guys can follow Mayor Mulvaney-Stanak over, I believe, your Instagram. Mayor BTV is my Instagram for the mayor official stuff, also on Facebook.
And you all can definitely say hi whenever you see her around Burlington or stop by the State House and maybe she'll give you a de facto tour and get some more fun facts.
Great. Thanks, Kachi.
Thank you. You guys check out this interview, like I said, on Kickin with Kachi on YouTube, Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at onye.777. Thank you again, and we're out of here.